in which we examined how people engage with new ventilation technologies in low energy housing. And the reason this information is required, I think, is that if we're to ensure that the diffusion of continuous whole house ventilation technologies within UK housing actually results in the energy savings that we are expecting. So the piece of research uses a qualitative methodology. Fieldwork was conducted at 3 recently completed social housing developments in the UK. And I was looking at 3 different ventilation technologies. So looking at passive stack ventilation, mechanical extract ventilation, and mechanical ventilation recovery. I used in-depth interviews, photography, and resident walkthroughs to collect data. So what was I actually doing? So I wanted to investigate whether the domestication of technology model, which was proposed by Silverstone in relation to information and communication technologies, whether this could actually be applied to energy efficient ventilation. So the model suggests that there are 4 stages that a technology needs to pass through in order for it to be accepted and widely adopted through a society. And the stages are listed on the slide, so appropriation, objectification, incorporation, and conversion. So using this domestication framework, I analysed my interview data, and what I actually found was that at each of these supposed stages of domestication, actually I was identifying various barriers and obstacles which could actually be preventing users from taking ownership of their new technology. So I'm just going to present one example from the first stage of appropriation to illustrate my point. So appropriation, this concerns the extent to which people choose to bring the technology into their own home. So it's the point at which they go out, they choose it, they buy it, and then they bring it into the domestic context. So the framework assumes that technology has been deliberately chosen by the end user, and also that they're already living in the home before the technology enters it. But actually, in the case of ventilation in social housing and new build social housing, neither of these is actually true. So actually there are several intermediary owners of the technology. So for example, there's the architects, the contractor, the installer, and then the RSL, who are actually responsible for choosing, specifying, and installing the system. So perhaps you could say that appropriation has been carried out by other people on behalf of the tenants. However, I actually met one resident who was really dissatisfied with her system, with her ventilation, despite having supported this idea of a low energy home. And she's got no idea how it's supposed to function, but she's decided that it isn't working, she's rejected it, and she's opening the windows instead. So to me, this suggests that the appropriation stage hasn't actually happened. So my paper goes through all the different stages and it argues that Silverstone's domestication model doesn't really fit in this particular context. And then proposes an alternative framework for how we might explain how people adapt to living with a new type of ventilation system. I haven't got time to go into details, so if you want to find out more, you have to read the paper. But I think the most important argument of the paper, which I'm going to end on now, is that it demonstrates quite how big a challenge we have if we're actually going to get a large proportion of the population living with these systems happily. And it also highlights that I think we might be wrong in assuming a very rapid diffusion of this particular technology in the way that happened perhaps with mobile phones and computers, because actually the wider context within which this so-called domestication is happening isn't actually the same. So I think that's probably all I've got time for. Just before I finish, I want to acknowledge my co-author, Dr. Leifung Chu, who helped me a lot with this paper, so thank you.